This is Writing Daily, and I'm Devin, your host. Every day we get together and we talk about some sort of a writerly thing, some sort of experience that is going to be useful to you as a writer to finish your work, to get things done, all that kind of fun stuff, as well as how we put ourselves out there, how we become better writers. And I guess I wanted to tell you a little bit of a story, but before I do that, I wanted to introduce myself. My name is Devin Galladay. I'm the editor-in-chief of In the Know Traveler. I'm also the author of the forthcoming memoir, 10,000 Miles with My Dead Father's Ashes. As always, if you like what I'm doing, please consider hitting the like button down here somewhere. Whether you're watching me live or not, it's always helpful. It lets me know that I'm heading in the right direction. Welcome, Morgana. Welcome, Charles. Always wonderful to have some folks here while I'm doing this thing live. I've got kind of a complicated topic today. So I'm going to keep talking and hopefully I will gel into the right direction. So I was at a literary event, and this is a number of years ago, and welcome Kim and Kim. So I'm at this event, this literary event a number of years ago, and a publisher was speaking from a fairly prominent small press, and she had made the comment that, you know, men read men and women read women, and that's it. And she kind of made it like there's this cut and dry situation going on here. Before I go, I'm going to quickly answer this question. You're looking tan and rested. Have you been traveling? I have. I was actually in Mexico. I actually look like a complete hot mess. I don't know if you're listening to this podcast or if you're seeing me live, but I am completely disheveled and unshaven, and that's okay. And the show goes on. So to get back to what I was talking about, I was at this literary event, and the woman there the woman publisher made this comment: men only read men and women only read women. And so for me, that was kind of not actually true. And at the end of the day, at the end of her speech, which was actually quite informative, I asked her about it, and she goes, you know, 'cause I think what I was hoping to say was, well, that can't be right. There has to be some other angle going on here. And she basically said, no, this isn't right. Most of the time, people are reading books by they're reading books written by people who are like them, most like them. And so I kind of get that. And at the other end of the spectrum, it's really not my experience. Don't get me wrong. I've read a lot of books and articles written by white guys, like no question about that. And at the same time, I've been really inspired by great writing of people that are outside of my gender, outside of my race, outside of my philosophical bent, outside of everything. Because to be quite honest with you, and that's really what this show is all about, is kind of opening the door to read other people's work that maybe you wouldn't read normally because their name or their ethnicity or some other thing is kind of beyond the pale, as it were, beyond what I might normally do or what the average person might be attracted to. So I'm kind of hoping what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce you to a handful of books and writers that I think you're going to love, that I love, that I think, with any luck, somebody in this list is going to be sort of like outside of the box of whom you might normally read. And I'm just going to this is one of these topics that's really enormous. And I think it's to some degree fairly topical. I think right now we're sort of like in this, immigration turmoil thing. And I honestly believe that we get to understand each other by getting to know each other. I think And on top of it is that books is probably one of the easiest, most accessible ways to get insights of how other people are experiencing the world that is beyond your understanding. You know what I mean? Like, my filter really begins and ends with just me sitting here, right? But if I open up a book on a subject that I may not know really well, by a person or a culture that I may not know very well, like, listen, I'm a travel writer, and I have been for 17 years. And Mark Twain, I'm probably going to butcher this quote, but Mark Twain was quoted as saying that if you don't travel, you're only reading one page of the book. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. And by the way, Rich, thank you for joining us. Marcia, Sonia, and Kim. Kim says, very interesting. I don't think I've ever thought of it that way, but I do believe I lean towards reading work from authors I feel I relate to. Yeah, I think there's probably some thing that kind of just connects us. You know what I mean? Maybe it's even sort of like a boyish looking book cover versus a girlish looking book cover, like the pink and the blue thing. Oh, I'm going to grab the blue because I'm a boy. And there's so much cultural things that are automatically built into that, that this may be just like an automatic cultural thing. So hopefully I'm going to introduce you to some writers and some ideas that may be worth something to you down the road. This may be a longer one. No, I'm going to try and keep it short. So I'm going to do this quickly, but I may go back and dive into a little bit deeper some of the writers that I think are really incredible writers that really I think open doors to culture and ideas that we may not think about all the time. So anyway, this is not in any particular order at all, but this particular book is a series of short stories by a writer named ZZ Packer. She is an African-American woman. I didn't really think about it all that much when this book was assigned. I was in, I think, a BA program with a professor named Emily Rapp, who's certainly crazy talented and very, very smart. And anyway, African-American writer, very, very talented. This particular book was really got loads of wonderful big thumbs up from the literary scene. And I think for me, it was very insightful about sort of the Black experience. And on top of it is just a beautifully crafted, well-written, wonderful book. I highly recommended it. And so I want you to get to know ZZ Packer. She doesn't have a ton of stuff, but I mean, she's written a lot of articles, but also this particular book, Drinking Coffee Elsewhere, is a marvel. In terms of culture, can we see this? Sandra Cisneros, House on Mango Street. I mean, this book is not a secret, but it is honestly, I recommend men reading this book. This certainly has a very Latin culture thing going on with it, about family. I think you probably will love it. Welcome, Jill. Welcome, Ian. Yes, great stuff. Yes, we're supposed to read everything, but just in case for those who don't, I want to give you a few good writers and authors that you may want to explore. Obviously, James Baldwin is a guy that was certainly bigger in the 60s. Go Tell It Out on the Mountain is a wonderful book. Very politically social, civil, civics-minded, race-minded, wanted you really to understand what was going on in the hearts of the civil rights movement in the 60s. I think, without getting too much into it, I think he kind of got fed up with the United States and moved to France for much of his later life. But a wonderful writer, and I think an incredibly important writer. Catherine, welcome. And so, terrific writer who really speaks to, this is Haruki Murakami, The Wind-Up Bird Chronicle, which I have to tell you, a lot of Asian writers, and I think this is kind of an interesting thing, they tend to write around the thing. You know what I mean? They may not talk about it. So you kind of have to really be aware and pay attention to it. Haruki Murakami actually has two scenes I can't say this about any other writer. This book has 2 scenes in it that actually gave me nightmares as an adult person. Absolutely, on the one hand, funny and interesting and really slow in his writing evolution. But this book gave me nightmares. I think he's a wonderful, wonderful writer. I've got like 10 of his books. I think he's incredible. I think he's absolutely worth checking out. Another book, this kind of lends itself, again, kind of like, what do I want to say? Jorge Borges. I really got to learn about him when I went back into school. This is his collective works, but he wrote a book called Ficciones. I think one of my goals is to learn Spanish well enough that I can read Jorge Borges in the original Espanol. Probably a long way from that, but I think an incredible writer. And what he did a lot of was, magical realism. That is the literary phrase that I'm looking for. It's basically something, by all accounts, if you open up the book and you're reading it, there's just some very usual, regular human things that are going on. And then something is going to happen that is not of this earth. And something is going to happen, and it's going to be mystical or magical or something different, but it's still going to be presented by something that's happening here in this time, in this place. And it's beautiful writing. Jorge Borges is certainly a master. He's a very, very well-known writer. So again, these aren't sort of like secret writers, but really if you're looking for somebody to explore that is outside of what you might normally read, to kind of get a glimpse into culture or your opposite gender or something like that, absolutely worth exploring. Toni Morrison, certainly this particular book is called Jazz. I remember being told at the time this was one of the 5 greatest books ever written. I don't know if I would agree with that, but she is a crazy good writer, and she is crazy, crazy smart, and she writes about important things. I think Toni Morrison, again, you can find her at the library. Matter of fact, I think all of these writers you should be able to find very easily at the library, worth checking out. And I think I wanted to add one writer that is somewhat new, although very, very established, incredibly talented, Dana Johnson in the Not Quite Dark, another female African American writer. I kind of don't like that term. I'll save that for another time and place. Welcome, Caitlin. By the way, if you like what I'm doing, make sure that you consider hitting the like button. So we talk about writing and we talk about writers, and obviously I said it very early on in here, but the goal of this little session, which I probably may expand into larger things where I can really dive more into a book, is that we should be learning more about cultures that aren't part of our own, whether it's part of the American experience that we don't necessarily possess. Read people that are across your gender. Read, writing by people that are that are translated from foreign language. Read about people who are doing something different and describing it in ways that you may not normally do. I think what that does, and this is, not only as a person, but I think as a writer, I think it's almost imperative, because what you're going to get is something that is going to be a slight twist on the way you might look at it or the way you might describe it. And my experience is that you can't help but learn something from that experience. Anyway, I went a little bit longer than what I normally would. So anyway, long story short, we do writing daily every day. You can find me at devingallaudet.com. The link is below. Feel free, whether you are watching me, regardless of where you're watching me, make sure that you consider hitting the like button or sending me a little note. I respond to everything, all questions, especially if they're sort of writerly. I am happy to perhaps either answer, or I will make it into an episode here of Writing Daily. So anyway, that's what I've got for today. I hope to see you guys again really soon. Thank you so much for joining me. And as always, I am the author of the memoir, 10,000 Miles with My Dead Father's Ashes, and editor-in-chief of In the Know Traveler. And we talk about writing so much. We love that you're here. Anyway, that's what I got today. Thanks so much for being here, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.